Lieutenant Sarah Chun had always been different. Growing up in a small town in Oregon, she was the girl who climbed the tallest trees, who never backed down from a dare, and who spent her summers learning martial arts instead of shopping at the mall. Her parents, both engineers, had encouraged her unconventional interests, though they never imagined their daughter would one day be standing on the beach at Coronado, California, preparing for the most grueling military training in the world. The morning sun cast long shadows across the sand as Sarah adjusted her gear for another day of basic underwater demolition/SEAL training. Around her, 43 other candidates prepared for what their instructors promised would be another day of carefully orchestrated misery. Sarah was one of only 2 women in the class, and she knew that every eye was on her, waiting for her to fail. "Chun," barked Instructor Petty Officer Martinez, his voice cutting through the morning air like a whip. "You're with Alpha Squad today. Try to keep up." Sarah nodded curtly, slinging her gear over her shoulder. She had learned early in training that the instructors tested everyone differently. For some, it was about pushing physical limits. For others, it was mental resilience. For her, she suspected it was about proving that she belonged here at all. The first evolution of the day was a 10-mile beach run in full gear. As they set off along the coastline, Sarah found her rhythm quickly. Running had always been her strength. In high school, she had been the state champion in cross-country. In college, she had dominated the ROTC fitness competitions. But this was different. The weight of the gear, the soft sand that shifted under her boots, and the relentless pace set by the instructors combined to create a challenge unlike anything she had faced before. Beside her, Petty Officer Third Class Marcus Williams kept pace easily. Williams was a former college football player from Texas who had joined the Navy to serve his country after September 11th. He was built like a linebacker and had the natural strength that made many of the physical evolutions seem effortless for him. But Sarah had learned that in SEAL training, natural ability only took you so far. "How you holding up, Chun?" Williams asked as they crested a particularly steep section of beach. "Just getting warmed up," Sarah replied, though her lungs were already burning from the combination of cold morning air and exertion. Behind them, she could hear the labored breathing of some of their classmates. SEAL training had a way of revealing who people really were under pressure. Some of the biggest, strongest candidates had already rung the bell that sat in the center of their training compound, officially withdrawing from the program. Others, who looked like they had no business attempting such an elite course, continued to surprise everyone with their resilience. The run took them past the famous Hotel del Coronado, where tourists in comfortable clothes watched the SEAL candidates with a mixture of admiration and bewilderment. Sarah caught glimpses of children pointing at them, probably wondering why anyone would voluntarily put themselves through such obvious suffering. As they approached the 8-mile mark, Instructor Martinez called for a halt. The candidates formed up in the surf zone, the cold Pacific water rushing around their legs as they stood at attention. "Looks like some of you are getting comfortable," Martinez announced, his eyes scanning the formation. "That's a problem, because comfortable people don't become SEALs. Drop down and give me buddy carries. Chun, you're carrying Williams." Sarah felt every eye in the formation turn toward her. Williams outweighed her by at least 60 pounds, all of it muscle. But she had expected this. Everything in training was designed to test limits, and she knew that her instructors would look for creative ways to challenge her specifically. Without hesitation, she moved behind Williams and helped him climb onto her back. The weight was substantial, but she had been preparing for this moment for months. Her training regimen had included carrying weighted packs that were proportionally heavier than what most men carried, specifically to prepare for situations like this. The instructor pointed down the beach. "Half-mile buddy carry race. Last team to finish gets to start tomorrow's training with an extra hour of PT." Sarah adjusted Williams on her back and started moving. The weight made each step sink deeper into the sand, and she could feel her heart rate spike immediately. But she also felt something else, a fierce determination that had been building inside her since the day she first decided to pursue SEAL training. The other candidates moved ahead of her initially, but Sarah had learned to pace herself. She found a steady rhythm and focused on her breathing just as she had been taught in her martial arts training years before. Step by step, she began to close the gap with the leaders. Williams, to his credit, stayed perfectly still on her back, making himself as easy to carry as possible. "You got this, Chun," he whispered quietly. "Steady pace." At the quarter-mile mark, Sarah was in the middle of the pack. Her legs burned and her shoulders ached, but her breathing was still controlled. She watched as one of the teams ahead of her began to struggle, the carrier's pace slowing noticeably. "Pick it up, Chun," shouted Instructor Martinez, who was running alongside the candidates with apparent ease. "Your buddy's life depends on it." This was more than just a training exercise, Sarah realized. In combat, a SEAL might need to carry a wounded teammate to safety under the most challenging conditions imaginable. The weight on her back represented more than just Williams. It represented the trust that her future teammates would place in her ability to bring them home. With 200 yards to go, Sarah was in fourth place. The leader was starting to fade, his steps becoming increasingly erratic. Sarah could hear his labored breathing from 20 yards behind him. She made her decision and increased her pace. The sand seemed to grab at her feet with each step, but Sarah pressed forward. She passed the struggling leader with 50 yards to go, then set her sights on the second-place team. The finish line, marked by two instructors standing in the surf, seemed impossibly far away. "Come on, Chun," Williams called out, though she could hear the strain in his voice from being carried for so long. 20 yards. Sarah's vision had narrowed to a tunnel focused on the finish line. Her legs felt like they were moving through concrete, but she refused to slow down. With a final surge of effort, she passed the second-place team and crossed the finish line, collapsing to her knees in the shallow water with Williams rolling off her back. "Second place," announced Instructor Martinez. Not bad for a lightweight. As Sarah knelt in the surf, gasping for air, she felt Williams' hand on her shoulder. "That was outstanding," he said quietly. "I don't know how you did that." The truth was, Sarah wasn't entirely sure either. What she did know was that she had discovered something important about herself in those final yards. The weight on her back hadn't been a burden. It had been a responsibility, and she would carry that responsibility as far as necessary. As the candidates formed up for the run back to base, Sarah caught the eye of Instructor Martinez. For just a moment, she thought she saw something that might have been approval in his expression. But the moment passed quickly, and his face returned to its customary mask of professional indifference. "Don't get cocky, Chun," he said as he passed her position in the formation. "Tomorrow we find out what you're really made of." Sarah nodded, understanding that this was just the beginning. SEAL training was designed to break people down and rebuild them into something stronger. She had passed today's test, but she knew that each day would bring new challenges, each one designed to push her further than she thought possible. As they ran back along the beach, Sarah thought about why she was here. It wasn't to prove that women could be SEALs. It was to become the best warrior she could possibly be. The team needed people who could carry their share of the load, literally and figuratively. Today, she had shown that she could carry more than her share when necessary. But she also knew that her instructors were just getting started. The real tests were yet to come, and they would challenge not just her physical abilities, but her mental toughness, her ability to make split-second decisions under pressure, and her capacity to function as part of a team when everything was falling apart around her. The sun was setting behind them as they approached the training compound, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to prove herself, and new chances to discover what she was truly capable of accomplishing. Sarah Chun was ready for whatever came next. As they entered the compound and began to secure their gear for the day, Sarah allowed herself a moment of quiet satisfaction. She had survived another day of SEAL training, and she was still here. More importantly, she was getting stronger, both physically and mentally, with each challenge she faced. The journey to becoming a Navy SEAL was far from over, but Sarah knew she was on the right path. Each day brought her closer to earning the trident that would mark her as one of the most elite warriors in the world. And she was determined to prove that she deserved to wear it. 3 weeks in a Hell Week, Sarah Chun had learned that the human body could endure far more than she had ever imagined possible. She had been running on less than 4 hours of sleep for days. Her hands were raw from rope work, and her uniform was permanently stained with sand, salt, and sweat. But she was still here, and that meant everything. The bell sat in the center of the compound like a constant reminder of surrender. Its bronze surface gleamed in the early morning light, and Sarah could see the growing pile of helmets beneath it, each one representing a candidate who had decided they had reached their limit. The class that had started with 45 candidates was now down to 18. "Gather round, tadpoles," shouted Chief Petty Officer Rodriguez, the lead instructor whose reputation preceded him throughout the special operations community. Rodriguez was a legend, a man who had served multiple combat deployments and whose chest was covered in ribbons that told the story of a career spent in the world's most dangerous places. The remaining candidates formed a tight circle around Rodriguez, their faces showing the strain of days without adequate rest or nutrition. Sarah stood between Williams and another teammate, Petty Officer Johnson, a quiet man from Alabama who seemed to have an endless capacity for suffering without complaint. "Today we're going to test your ability to function under stress," Rodriguez announced, his eyes moving from face to face in the formation. "You're going to participate in a combat simulation that will push every skill you've learned to its absolute limit." Sarah felt her pulse quicken. Combat simulations were designed to be as close to real warfare as possible without actually putting lives at immediate risk. They would involve live ammunition, explosives, and scenarios that required split-second decision-making under extreme pressure. "You'll be divided into 2 teams," Rodriguez continued. "One team will be tasked with infiltrating a fortified position and extracting a high-value target. The other team will be defending that position. Both teams will be using simulated ammunition, but I guarantee you'll feel every hit." The instructor's eyes locked onto Sarah's. "Chun, you'll be team leader for the assault force. Your mission is to extract the target and get your team out alive. Failure is not an option." Sarah felt the weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. Leading a team during a training exercise was one thing. Leading a combat simulation was something else entirely. The decisions she made in the next few hours would determine not only her own success, but the success of every person under her command. As the teams were divided and briefed on their specific missions, Sarah gathered her 5-person assault team around a sand table that showed the layout of the target building. The structure was a concrete block building with multiple entry points, but intelligence suggested that all but one were heavily defended. "Here's what we know," Sarah began, pointing to different locations on the sand table. "The target is being held on the 2nd floor, northeast corner room. The defending team has had 2 hours to set up their positions, so we have to assume they've covered all the obvious approaches." Williams studied the diagram intently. "What about the roof? Rappel insertion?" "Too exposed," replied Johnson. "They'll have overwatch positions covering all the high approaches." Sarah nodded. "Johnson's right. We need to think like they're thinking. They expect us to try something dramatic, so maybe the best approach is the most straightforward one." She pointed to the main entrance. "Front door. Fast, aggressive, overwhelming force. We breach simultaneously at 2 points, main entrance and this side window, and clear the building room by room." Petty Officer Rodriguez approached their planning session. "You have 30 minutes to finalize your plan and brief your team. After that, you execute. No do-overs, no second chances." As the team continued planning, Sarah felt the familiar sensation of her mind shifting into combat mode. Her breathing slowed, her awareness expanded, and she began to see the tactical situation with crystal clarity. This was what she had been training for, the moment when all the physical conditioning, weapons training, and tactical instruction would come together in a high-pressure situation. The assault team moved to their staging area, a position 300 yards from the target building. Each team member checked their equipment one final time, ensuring that their weapons were loaded with simulated ammunition and that their protective gear was properly secured. "Remember," Sarah addressed her team, "speed and aggression are our friends. The longer we stay in that building, the more opportunities they have to outmaneuver us. Get in, find the target, get out." The radio crackled with the voice of the exercise controller. "Alpha Team, you are clear to begin your assault. Execute. 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 Sarah led her team forward at a controlled run, using available cover to mask their approach. The defending team would be watching for them, but Sarah hoped they could get close enough to the building before being detected to give themselves a tactical advantage. At 50 yards from the target, all hell broke loose. Simulated gunfire erupted from multiple positions in the building, and Sarah could feel the impact of simulated rounds hitting the dirt around her feet. Move! 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 She shouted, leading her team in a bounding advance toward the building. 2 team members provided covering fire while the other 3 advanced. Then, the roles reversed, allowing them to maintain continuous pressure on the defenders while still moving forward. The breach went exactly as planned. Williams and Johnson hit the side window with explosive charges while Sarah and the other 2 team members assaulted through the front door. The coordinated attack succeeded in overwhelming the first-floor defenders, though not without cost. One of Sarah's team members took multiple simulated hits and was declared casualties by the exercise controllers. Now down to 4 effective fighters, Sarah led the team up the stairwell toward the second floor. This was the most dangerous part of the mission. They would be funneled into a narrow space where the defenders would have every advantage. Johnson, take point, Sarah ordered. Williams, cover our 6. Stay tight and move fast. The second floor was a maze of interconnected rooms, each one a potential ambush site. Sarah could hear movement ahead of them, but in the confusion of the exercise, it was impossible to tell whether it was defenders or the target they were trying to extract. They cleared 3 rooms successfully before encountering serious resistance. As they approached the 4th room, automatic weapons fire erupted from 2 directions simultaneously. Sarah realized they had walked into a carefully prepared ambush. Contact front and left, she shouted, diving for cover behind an overturned desk. Johnson, can you flank left? But Johnson was already down, having taken multiple hits as he tried to advance through the ambush zone. Williams was pinned down behind a concrete pillar, unable to move without exposing himself to devastating fire. Sarah's mind raced through their options. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and running out of time. In a real combat situation, this would be the moment when training and instinct would have to overcome impossible odds. She made her decision. Williams, covering fire on my mark. I'm going to assault through. Negative, Williams shouted back. That's suicide. Just do it, Sarah replied, checking her weapon one last time. On her signal, Williams opened fire, forcing the defenders to take cover momentarily. Sarah used that split second to sprint across the open space, diving through the doorway of a room where the target was supposedly being held. She rolled as she landed, coming up with her weapon ready, and found herself face to face with 2 defenders who were just as surprised as she was. For a moment that seemed to last forever, all 3 fighters stared at each other, weapons trained, but no one firing. Then, Sarah heard something that changed everything. A woman's voice calling for help from the far corner of the room. The target wasn't a mannequin or a volunteer role player. It was another SEAL candidate, one who had been captured during an earlier phase of the exercise and was now depending on Sarah's team for rescue. The 2 defenders seemed momentarily confused by Sarah's sudden appearance, and she used that confusion to her advantage. Moving with the speed and precision that came from months of intensive training, she neutralized both defenders with simulated gunfire before they could react. Target secured, she called out, moving to untie the rescued candidate. Williams, we need immediate exfil. But as they prepared to leave the room, Sarah heard the sound that every special operations fighter dreaded: incoming reinforcements. The exercise controllers were escalating the scenario, adding complexity that would test their ability to adapt under pressure. Chun, Williams called from the hallway. We've got company coming up the stairs. Multiple contacts. Sarah helped the rescued candidate to her feet, assessing her condition quickly. The woman appeared to be uninjured, but was clearly exhausted from her time in captivity simulation. Can you move? Sarah asked. Yes, the candidate replied firmly. Get me out of here. Sarah keyed her radio. Exercise control, this is Alpha Team Leader. Target secured, requesting immediate extraction. The response was not what she wanted to hear. Alpha Team, no extraction available. You're to exfiltrate on foot to designated Rally Point Bravo. Be advised, enemy reinforcements are converging on your position. This was now a true test of leadership under pressure. Sarah had to get her remaining team members and the rescued candidate out of an increasingly dangerous situation with limited resources and no outside support. Williams, she called. We're moving to the roof. Rally Point Bravo is too far with this much enemy activity. Roger that, Williams replied, though Sarah could hear the strain in his voice. As they moved through the building toward the roof access, Sarah reflected on how much she had changed since the beginning of training. Months ago, she would have been intimidated by this level of responsibility. Now, she felt focused and determined, ready to do whatever was necessary to complete the mission and bring her people home safely. The exercise was far from over, but Sarah knew she had already passed an important test. She was thinking like a SEAL, acting like a SEAL, and leading like a SEAL. Whatever happened next, she was ready for it. The rescue simulation had ended successfully, but Sarah Chin knew it was just a warm-up for what Chief Rodriguez had planned next. As the remaining 17 candidates gathered in the compound's briefing room, the atmosphere was tense with anticipation. Each person had survived challenges that would have broken them just weeks earlier, but they all understood that the hardest tests were yet to come. Chief Rodriguez stood before a large tactical display showing a complex military scenario. His weathered face bore the scars of multiple combat deployments, and when he spoke, every candidate hung on his words. Ladies and gentlemen, what you're about to experience is called the Crucible, Rodriguez announced. It's a 48-hour continuous exercise that will test every skill you've learned and push you beyond what you think is possible. Sarah felt her pulse quicken. She had heard whispers about the Crucible from former SEAL candidates who had either passed or failed the test. Those who passed spoke of it with a mixture of pride and relief. Those who failed rarely spoke of it at all. You will be divided into 4-person teams, Rodriguez continued. Each team will be given a series of missions that must be completed in sequence. These missions will involve live-fire exercises, underwater operations, hostage rescue scenarios, and extended overland navigation. You will be operating with minimal food, minimal sleep, and maximum stress. The chief's eyes moved slowly across the formation, making eye contact with each candidate. Some of you will not make it through the next 48 hours. That's not a threat. That's a mathematical certainty. The question is, who has what it takes to push through when everything inside them is screaming to quit? Sarah was assigned to Team Alpha, along with Williams, Johnson, and a newer candidate named Ramirez who had impressed everyone with his technical skills, but hadn't yet been tested under extreme pressure. As the teams received their initial mission briefings, Sarah realized that this exercise would be different from everything they had experienced before. Your first mission, explained Instructor Martinez, is a beach reconnaissance operation. You'll insert via small boat, conduct surveillance on a target facility, gather specific intelligence, and exfiltrate without being detected. Time limit, 8 hours. Sarah studied the mission brief intently. The target was a mock facility constructed on a remote section of beach, but intelligence indicated it was defended by role players who had been specifically trained to detect SEAL infiltration attempts. What's our biggest challenge? Williams asked as the team gathered around their planning materials. Time, replied Johnson immediately. 8 hours sounds like a lot, but if we factor in insertion, reconnaissance, and exfiltration, we're going to be cutting it close. Ramirez pointed to the aerial photographs of the target area. These defensive positions are going to make close-in reconnaissance nearly impossible during daylight hours. We might have to wait for darkness. Sarah nodded, already forming a plan in her mind. Here's what I'm thinking. We insert before dawn, establish an observation post here, on this ridgeline. That gives us overwatch of the entire facility while keeping us far enough away to avoid detection. She traced a route on the map with her finger. We observe during daylight hours, gather our intelligence, then move to a closer position after dark for detailed reconnaissance. Exfiltration just before sunrise. The plan was solid, but Sarah knew that no plan survived first contact with reality. As they prepared their equipment for the mission, she made sure each team member understood not just a specific role, but everyone else's as well. In a four-person team, any single casualty could compromise the entire mission. The insertion went smoothly. Their small boat dropped them at a predetermined point along the coastline, and they moved quickly inland toward their observation post. Sarah was impressed with how quietly her team moved through the rough terrain. Months of training had turned them into efficient, professional operators. They reached their initial observation post just as the sun was rising, providing perfect illumination of the target facility. Through high-powered optics, Sarah could see that the intelligence briefing had been accurate. The facility was heavily defended, with multiple sentry positions and regular patrols that would make close approach extremely difficult. For 6 hours, they maintained careful surveillance, documenting guard rotations, identifying key structures within the facility, and noting any unusual activity that might indicate the presence of high-value targets. The work was tedious, but crucial. In real combat operations, this kind of intelligence could mean the difference between mission success and disaster. As afternoon turned to evening, Sarah began preparing for the most dangerous phase of their mission. They would have to move much closer to the target to gather the specific intelligence required by their briefing. This meant penetrating the outer security perimeter and conducting close-in surveillance of individual buildings. Remember, Sarah briefed her team as they prepared to move, "We're ghosts out there. No contact with enemy forces unless absolutely necessary for mission accomplishment or team survival." The movement to their secondary observation post took 2 hours of careful navigation through terrain that seemed designed to make noise with every step. Sarah led the team personally, using hand signals to communicate and stopping frequently to listen for any indication that they had been detected. They established their close-in observation post just 50 yards from the target facility's main building. From this position, they could see individual people moving within the structure, and Sarah was able to identify what appeared to be a high-value target based on the deference shown by other personnel. But as they prepared to begin their detailed reconnaissance, everything went wrong. A guard patrol that wasn't supposed to exist according to their intelligence briefing appeared directly in their line of retreat. Sarah realized immediately that this was a test within a test. The instructors were changing the parameters of the exercise to see how the team would adapt under pressure. "Contact," whispered Williams, who was providing security for the team's rear. "2 guards, moving directly toward our position." Sarah's mind raced through their options. They could try to evade the patrol, but that would mean abandoning their mission before gathering the required intelligence. They could neutralize the guards, but that would compromise their stealth and likely result in a massive search effort that would make exfiltration impossible. "How long do we need for the intelligence gathering?" she whispered to Johnson, who was operating their surveillance equipment. "At least 20 minutes for a complete assessment," he replied. Sarah made her decision. Ramirez, Johnson, continue the mission. Williams, and I will deal with the patrol. She led Williams on a careful flanking movement that would allow them to neutralize the guards without alerting the rest of the facility. This was exactly the kind of split-second tactical decision-making that SEAL operations required, and Sarah felt her training take over completely. The neutralization went perfectly. Using non-lethal techniques they had practiced hundreds of times, Sarah and Williams subdued both guards quickly and quietly, then concealed their unconscious bodies where they wouldn't be discovered until the exercise was over. But when they returned to the observation post, they found that the exercise controllers had introduced another complication. Johnson reported that additional personnel had arrived at the facility, including what appeared to be a high-ranking military officer who was clearly there for an important meeting. "This changes everything," Sarah realized. "If we can document this meeting, it could provide intelligence that's far more valuable than what we were originally sent to gather." The team remained in position for an additional hour, gathering detailed intelligence on the unexpected meeting and documenting the arrival and departure of various high-value personnel. By the time they began their exfiltration movement, they had collected far more information than their original mission required. The movement back to their extraction point was uneventful, but Sarah knew that the real test was just beginning. The Crucible consisted of multiple connected missions, each one more challenging than the last. This beach reconnaissance operation was just the first step in a 48-hour journey that would push every member of her team to their absolute limits. As they waited for their extraction boat, Sarah reflected on how well her team had performed under pressure. They had adapted to changing circumstances, overcome unexpected obstacles, and completed their mission successfully. But she also knew that Chief Rodriguez and his instructors were just getting started. The extraction boat arrived precisely on schedule, and as they were transported back to the main base, Sarah used the travel time to begin planning for their next mission. Whatever it was, she was determined that her team would be ready for it. "How do you think we did?" Ramirez asked as they approached the dock. "We completed the mission," Sarah replied. "But that was just the beginning. The next 40 hours are going to test everything we've learned and everything we are." As they disembarked and moved toward the briefing area for their next mission assignment, Sarah felt a sense of quiet confidence. Her team had worked together seamlessly, adapting to unexpected challenges and supporting each other when things went wrong. If they could maintain this level of performance for the remainder of the Crucible, they might just earn the right to call themselves Navy SEALs. But she also knew that Chief Rodriguez had designed the exercise specifically to break people down when they thought they were performing at their best. The next mission would be harder, the pressure would be greater, and the margin for error would be smaller. Sarah Chun was ready for whatever came next. 28 hours into the Crucible, Sarah Chin's team had successfully completed 3 missions, but the toll was becoming evident. Johnson had developed a significant limp after a hard landing during their airborne insertion exercise. Ramirez was showing signs of exhaustion that went beyond normal fatigue. Williams remained strong physically, but Sarah could see the strain in his eyes. They had been given exactly 4 hours of rest between missions, which meant they had managed perhaps 90 minutes of actual sleep in more than a day of continuous operations. Sarah's own body was running on pure adrenaline and determination, but she knew that wouldn't last much longer. Chief Rodriguez appeared as they finished cleaning their weapons after the 3rd mission. His presence usually meant either very good news or very bad news, and given the circumstances, Sarah suspected it wasn't good news. "Team Alpha," Rodriguez announced, "you have been selected for the final Crucible mission." Sarah felt her stomach tighten. The final mission was legendary among SEAL candidates. Those who had attempted it rarely discussed the details, but everyone knew it represented the ultimate test of everything a candidate had learned during training. "Your mission," Rodriguez continued, "is a direct action raid on a fortified position. The target is a terrorist cell that has taken hostages and is threatening to execute them if their demands are not met." He handed Sarah a thick mission briefing packet. "The facility is heavily defended, the hostages are in immediate danger, and you have limited resources for the assault. Intelligence suggests there are at least 12 defenders, all of them experienced fighters. Your team will be augmented by 2 additional members from candidates who have already completed their final missions." Sarah opened the briefing packet and immediately understood why this was considered the ultimate test. The target facility was a concrete structure with multiple defensive positions, limited approaches, and complex internal layout. The hostages were being held in a room that could only be reached by fighting through the entire building. As she studied the tactical situation, she was joined by the 2 additional team members, Petty Officer Stevens, a quiet professional from Team Charlie, and Petty Officer Martinez, one of the strongest candidates in their entire class. 6-person team, Sarah noted. "That's actually an advantage if we can coordinate properly." Stevens nodded. "What's the tactical situation?" Sarah spread the briefing materials on a nearby table. 12 defenders, unknown weapons and capabilities. 3 confirmed hostages, location known, but difficult to access. Time factor is critical because intelligence suggests the terrorists plan to begin executing hostages in 4 hours. Williams studied the building schematics carefully. Multiple entry points, but most of them are probably covered by defensive positions. "What about explosive breaching?" "Limited explosives available," Sarah replied, checking the equipment manifest. "We have enough for maybe 2 breaching charges, so we have to use them wisely." Martinez pointed to a section of the building schematic. "What about this structural weak point? If we could create a distraction here while the main assault goes through the primary entrance." Sarah was impressed by the tactical thinking. This was what happened when highly trained individuals work together under pressure. They found solutions that none of them could have developed individually. Here's what I'm thinking, Sarah began, outlining her plan. Two-pronged assault. Martinez and Stevens created a version at the north wall using one of our breaching charges. That should draw most of the defenders away from the main entrance. Williams, Johnson, and Ramirez assault through the front door using the second breaching charge. I go over the roof and drop down directly into the hostage room from above. The plan was audacious and risky, but Sarah believed it gave them the best chance of reaching the hostages before the terrorists could harm them. The diversionary attack would draw the defenders' attention while the main assault dealt with any remaining opposition. Her solo approach through the roof would put her in the hostage room faster than any other method, but it also meant she would be completely on her own if things went wrong. That's a lot of risk for you, Williams observed. If you get into trouble up there, we won't be able to support you immediately. I know, Sarah replied, but this gives the hostages the best chance of survival, and that has to be our primary consideration. Chief Rodriguez approached their planning session. You have 30 minutes to finalize your plan and brief your team. After that, you launch immediately. No hayar saus, no duovirs. As the team made final preparations, Sarah felt a strange sense of calm settling over her. This was what she had been training for since the day she arrived at Coronado. Every physical challenge, every tactical exercise, every moment of exhaustion and doubt had been preparing her for this exact situation. The movement to the target building took place under cover of darkness, with each team member carrying specific equipment for their role in the assault. Sarah had additional gear for her roof approach, including climbing equipment and specialized weapons for close-quarters combat. At the predetermined staging area, 300 yards from the target, Sarah made final communications checks with each team member. In a complex operation like this, timing and coordination were absolutely critical. Remember, she briefed the team, speed and violence of action are our friends. The faster we can overwhelm their defenses, the less time they have to harm the hostages. Through night vision equipment, Sarah could see the target building clearly. There were lights in several windows, and she could detect movement that indicated active guard positions. The intelligence briefing had been accurate. This was going to be a challenging fight. Team Alpha, you are clear to begin your assault in 60 seconds, came the voice of the exercise controller over their radio. Sarah checked her equipment one final time, then began her approach to the building. While her teammates moved to their assault positions, she had to get to the roof and position herself directly above the hostage room. The climb to the roof was more difficult than she had anticipated. The building was higher than it had appeared in the photographs, and her equipment made the ascent awkward and slow. But Sarah had always been an excellent climber, and she reached the roof just as the diversionary explosion erupted on the north side of the building. The explosion was perfectly timed and positioned. Sarah could hear shouting from inside the building as the defenders responded to what they thought was the main attack. This gave her the distraction she needed to position herself over the hostage room. Using a small explosive charge, Sarah blew a hole in the roof directly above where the hostages were being held. The explosion was smaller than those her teammates were using, but in the confined space of the building, it was tremendously loud and disorienting. She rappelled through the hole she had created, landing in a hostage room, just as two terrorists were moving toward the hostages with weapons drawn. Sarah's appearance through the ceiling caught them completely by surprise, and she was able to neutralize both of them before they could harm any of the captives. Hostages secured, she reported over a radio, beginning to cut the restraints that held the 3 role-playing victims. But the mission was far from over. Sarah could hear intense gunfire from other parts of the building as her teammates fought their way toward her position. The diversionary attack had worked perfectly, but now they had to extract the hostages and get everyone out safely. Alpha Team Leader, this is Williams. We're encountering heavy resistance on the second floor. At least 4 defenders between us and your position. Sarah made a quick assessment of her situation. The hostages were mobile, but shaken. She had limited ammunition and no immediate backup. The smart tactical decision would be to wait for her teammates to fight their way to her position. But intelligence had suggested that there might be additional terrorists in the building who hadn't been drawn away by the diversionary attack. If those individuals were moving toward the hostage room, waiting could be fatal for everyone. Negative, Sarah replied. I'm moving the hostages out through an alternate route. Continue your assault and clear the building completely. She had spotted what appeared to be a service corridor that led directly from the hostage room toward the building's rear exit. It was risky to move through an uncleared area with 3 civilians in tow, but Sarah believed it was their best chance of getting everyone out alive. Stay close to me, she instructed the hostages. Do exactly what I tell you when I tell you to do it. The movement through the service corridor was nerve-wracking. Sarah had to clear each section carefully while simultaneously protecting 3 people who had no tactical training and were understandably terrified by everything that was happening around them. They made it halfway to the rear exit before encountering opposition. 2 defenders had apparently been left to guard the back of the building, and they opened fire the moment Sarah appeared with the hostages. This was the moment that would define everything Sarah had worked for. She was outnumbered, outgunned, and responsible for 3 lives that depended entirely on her ability to fight and win under impossible circumstances. But as she returned fire and maneuvered the hostages to safety, Sarah realized something important. She wasn't afraid. The months of training had prepared her not just physically and tactically, but mentally. She was exactly where she belonged, doing exactly what she had been born to do. The firefight was brief, but intense. Sarah's superior training and tactical positioning allowed her to neutralize both defenders quickly, clearing the path to the rear exit. As she led the hostages out of the building, she could hear her teammates completing their clearance of the interior. Building secured, came William's voice over the radio. All hostiles neutralized. Hostages safely extracted, Sarah replied. Moving to Rally Point Alpha. As the team gathered at the designated rally point, Sarah looked at each of her teammates with a sense of profound respect and gratitude. They had functioned perfectly as a unit, each person fulfilling their role while adapting to changing circumstances. The mission had been successful, but more importantly, they had proven to themselves that they were ready to become Navy SEALs. Chief Rodriguez appeared as they were securing their equipment. His expression was unreadable, but Sarah thought she detected something that might have been satisfaction in his eyes. Outstanding performance, he announced. You functioned as a team, adapted to changing circumstances, and completed your mission successfully. Sarah felt a surge of pride, but she also knew that the chief wasn't finished. However, Rodriguez continued, there's one more test. Chief Rodriguez led the exhausted team to a section of the training compound that Sarah had never seen before. The area was isolated from the main facilities, surrounded by high walls that blocked any view of what lay beyond. As they approached a nondescript building, Sarah felt an unusual tension in the air. This final test is different, Rodriguez explained as they gathered around him. It's not about physical strength, tactical skills, or even leadership ability. It's about understanding what it truly means to be a Navy SEAL. They entered a small room with concrete walls and minimal furniture. At the center was a simple wooden table with 2 chairs facing each other. The setup looked more like an interrogation room than a training facility. Chun, Rodriguez called out. You're first. Sarah approached the table, her mind racing through possibilities. After 46 hours of continuous testing, she couldn't imagine what final challenge could be more demanding than what they had already endured. Sit, Rodriguez instructed, pointing to one of the chairs. As Sarah took her seat, she heard footsteps behind her. Another person entered the room, a woman Sarah didn't recognize, wearing civilian clothes and appearing to be in her early 30s. The woman was Asian American, roughly Sarah's height and build, with an expression that seemed both nervous and determined. This is Dr. Lisa Park, Rodriguez announced. She's a research psychologist who has been studying the effectiveness of integrated combat units. She's also the person who will be administering your final test. Dr. Park took the seat across from Sarah, placing a thick file folder on the table between them. When she spoke, her voice was calm, but carried an undertone of authority that suggested she was accustomed to being taken seriously. Lieutenant Shun, Dr. Park began, what I'm about to tell you is classified information that will not leave this room. Do you understand? Yes, ma'am, Sarah replied, though she had no idea what to expect. Your performance throughout SEAL training has been exceptional, Dr. Park continued. Your physical scores, tactical evaluations, and leadership assessments all indicate that you have the potential to become an outstanding Navy SEAL. Sarah felt a surge of pride, but something in Dr. Park's tone suggested this wasn't entirely good news. However, Dr. Park continued, there are concerns at the highest levels of the Navy about the integration of women into SEAL teams. Some decision-makers believe that regardless of individual performance, the presence of women in combat units creates complications that outweigh any tactical advantages. Sarah felt her stomach drop. After everything she had endured, after proving herself repeatedly under the most challenging conditions imaginable, was she about to be told that politics would prevent her from becoming a SEAL? The test you're about to face, Dr. Park explained, will determine not just your own future, but the future of every woman who might attempt SEAL training after you. She opened the file folder and pulled out several photographs. These are pictures of male SEAL candidates who have failed specific aspects of training that you have successfully completed. The question is, do you believe your success proves that women can perform at the same level as men? Or do you believe your exceptional performance is an anomaly that shouldn't be used to set policy? Sarah studied the photographs, recognizing several faces from her own training class. These were strong, capable men who had simply reached their personal limits during one exercise or another. I'm not sure I understand the question, Sarah said carefully. Dr. Park leaned forward. I'm asking you to make a choice. You can graduate from SEAL training and become the first female Navy SEAL, but only if you recommend that the program remain closed to other women. The argument would be that your success was exceptional and shouldn't be used to justify broader integration. Sarah felt as if the room was spinning. This was impossible. After everything she had worked for, she was being asked to choose between her own dreams and the opportunities of every woman who might follow her. Alternatively, Dr. Park continued, you can recommend that SEAL training be open to qualified women regardless of gender, but you would not be allowed to graduate yourself. Your sacrifice would pave the way for future integration, but you would never wear the trident. The room fell completely silent. Sarah could hear her own heartbeat as she processed what she was being asked to choose. Either option meant that something she deeply valued would be lost forever. How long do I have to decide? Sarah asked. You don't, Dr. Park replied. This decision must be made based on your instinctive understanding of what's right, not on careful analysis of personal costs and benefits. Sarah looked across the table at Dr. Park, then at Chief Rodriguez, who had remained silent during the entire exchange. She thought about all the challenges she had overcome, all the time she had been told she wasn't strong enough, fast enough, or tough enough to succeed. But she also thought about the young girls who might be watching her story, wondering if they could dream of careers that had previously been closed to them. She thought about the teammates she had served with, who had judged her not by her gender, but by her ability to carry her share of the load and support them when it mattered most. I need to understand something, Sarah said finally. Is this test about what's best for the Navy, or is it about whether I can make hard decisions under pressure? Dr. Park smiled for the first time since entering the room. That's an excellent question. What do you think? Sarah thought about Chief Rodriguez and the months of training that had brought her to this moment. Every test had been designed to reveal something important about her character, her capabilities, or her commitment. This felt different, but it was still fundamentally about understanding who she was and what she stood for. I think, Sarah said slowly, that this is about whether I understand that being a SEAL means serving something larger than myself. She stood up from her chair, feeling a sense of clarity that surprised her with its intensity. My answer is that I recommend SEAL training be open to all qualified candidates regardless of gender, and I volunteer to serve as the test case for that policy. If my performance hasn't proven that women can succeed in this program, then no one woman's performance ever will. Dr. Park and Chief Rodriguez exchanged glances that Sarah couldn't interpret. Are you certain? Dr. Park asked. You understand what this choice means for your own career? I understand perfectly, Sarah replied. But I also understand what it means for the Navy and for the country. If we're going to have the strongest possible military, we need to recruit and retain the best possible people, regardless of any factor other than their ability to do the job. Chief Rodriguez stepped forward. Chun, are you prepared to demonstrate your commitment to that principle? Yes, sir. Then, I have one final order for you, Rodriguez said, his voice carrying the same intensity Sarah had heard throughout training. I want you to hit Dr. Park as hard as you can. Sarah felt as if the world had stopped moving. Sir, you heard me, Rodriguez continued. Dr. Park is going to attack you, and I want you to defend yourself with maximum force. This is a direct order from your commanding officer. Sarah looked at Dr. Park, who had stood up from her chair and was assuming what appeared to be a combat stance. Nothing about this situation made sense, but Sarah had been trained to follow orders even when she didn't understand them. Sir, I request clarification, Sarah said. What are the rules of engagement? No rules, Rodriguez replied. Defend yourself by any means necessary. Dr. Park moved towards Sarah with surprising speed and obvious skill. It became immediately clear that she was not just a research psychologist. She had extensive martial arts training and was attacking with serious intent to cause harm. Sarah's training took over instantly. She blocked Dr. Park's initial attack and countered with a strike that should have ended the confrontation immediately. But Dr. Park absorbed the blow and continued attacking with increasing intensity. The fight was brief but violent. Both women were skilled fighters, but Sarah's months of SEAL training had given her advantages that proved decisive. Within 30 seconds, she had Dr. Park pinned on the ground in a position where she could have easily caused serious injury. Stop! Rodriguez shouted. Sarah immediately released her hold and stepped back, breathing hard but ready to continue if necessary. Outstanding, Rodriguez announced. Dr. Park, are you injured? Dr. Park stood up, brushing dust from her clothes and smiling broadly. Nothing that won't heal in a few days. That was exactly what we needed to see. Sarah was completely confused. What just happened? Dr. Park approached her with her hand extended. What happened is that you just proved something very important about yourself and about the integration of women into combat units. As they shook hands, Dr. Park continued, I'm not a research psychologist. I'm Lieutenant Colonel Park, United States Marine Corps, and I've been testing integration protocol for the past 3 years. What you just demonstrated is that you can function effectively in combat regardless of the gender of your opponent. Sarah felt as if she was still missing something important. I don't understand. Chief Rodriguez stepped forward. Chun, the final test wasn't about choosing between your career and your principles. The final test was about whether you would follow orders and engage in combat when the situation didn't make sense to you. He gestured toward Lieutenant Colonel Park. In real combat, you might face female enemies who are just as dangerous as any male opponent. We needed to know that you could overcome any psychological barriers to engaging them with maximum force. Sarah began to understand. You were testing whether I could compartmentalize gender when it came to combat effectiveness. Exactly, Rodriguez confirmed. And you passed with flying colors. Lieutenant Colonel Park nodded. Your immediate response was to request clarification of rules of engagement, which shows excellent tactical thinking. When ordered to engage, you did so without hesitation and with appropriate force. And when ordered to stop, you disengaged immediately and completely. Sarah felt a mixture of relief and residual confusion. So what happens now? Chief Rodriguez smiled. The first time Sarah had seen him genuinely happy during the entire training program. Now you get your trident, he announced. You've successfully completed every aspect of Navy SEAL training. More importantly, you've proven that the integration of qualified women into SEAL teams can be accomplished without compromising operational effectiveness. As the implications of his words sank in, Sarah felt a surge of emotion that caught her completely by surprise. After months of physical and mental challenges that had pushed her beyond every limit she thought she had, she was finally going to achieve the goal that had seemed impossible when she first arrived at Coronado. There's one more thing, Lieutenant Colonel Park added. Your performance throughout this training program has been so exceptional that you're being recommended for immediate assignment to an operational SEAL team. No transition period, no additional training. You'll be deploying with Team 7 in 6 weeks. Sarah felt as if she was living in a dream. Operational assignment immediately after graduation was almost unheard of, reserved only for candidates who demonstrated truly exceptional potential. "Thank you, sir." "Thank you, ma'am," Sarah managed to say. "Don't thank us yet," Rodriguez replied with a grin. "Wait until you see what Team 7 has planned for your first deployment." As they left the testing facility and returned to the main compound, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. Every challenge had built on the previous one, each test revealing new aspects of her capabilities and character. The final test had been the most unusual, but it had also been the most important in terms of understanding what her success meant for the future. She thought about the young woman who had first reported to Coronado months ago, full of determination, but uncertain whether she truly belonged in the world of special operations. That woman had been transformed through training, challenges, and the support of teammates who had judged her solely on her ability to contribute to their shared mission. As Sarah Chun prepared for the graduation ceremony that would officially make her the first female Navy SEAL, she knew that this was not an ending, but a beginning. The real test would come during operational deployments, where the skills she had learned would be applied in situations where lives truly depended on her performance. But she was ready. More than ready. She was a United States Navy SEAL, and she had earned the right to wear the trident that represented membership in one of the world's most elite military units. The 2 seconds that had changed everything weren't just about following orders or engaging in combat. They were about understanding that true strength comes from serving something greater than yourself, regardless of the personal cost. Sarah Chun was ready for whatever came next.